And we're back. A bit later than expected. On two fronts. But that just means that we're on equal footing. I mean, not really, because so last time, it's supposed to happen. Silly food video game. And despite some minor changes to the first chapter, some food and weapon balance tweaks, that video is still as relevant as it ever was, so I'm not going to retread through all of that material again. If you're unfamiliar, just go watch the previous video. Well, either that, or be content with having cook, kill, repeat be your entire foundation going forward. It's not a good foundation. You should cook the card. Yeah, that's very self-serving. So this time around, in Chapter 2, everything old is new again. There's a new list of interesting weapons and food, better music, more varied environments and enemies, all coming in at around double the length of Chapter 1. Plus, it even kicks off with a new type of level. I mean, it is just an auto-scroller. But it's a nice change of pace in the moment. I like it. Plus, it has the added benefit of making the new areas in this chapter seem distant, unlike the first ones, which, for all intents and purposes, might as well have just been rooms right next to each other. So, while I'm sure I'll grow to hate this segment for slowing down any of my future playthroughs, first time around, I like it. It does its job well, and it really lends itself to the theme I had going on with my build. The theme of gun. It's guns now. Not exactly a focal point of this update, but it's gonna come up a lot. But ignoring that, and the high-stakes action of standing on a tractor, what exactly are all of these exciting improvements I'm talking about? Well, simply put, everything I complained about in the first chapter review. There's more here than just that, but let's just run down the list in case you forgot. The primary weapons have no flare, and are all the same. These new primary weapons all have different abilities, so they don't become completely irrelevant the second you unlock a new weapon of the same type. I mean, the assault rifle spear is one of the first weapons you can get in this chapter, and I used that thing for my entire playthrough. The audio presentation is bad. Oh.
Boo, you suck!
No, but seriously, all the sounds are hugely improved. The leeches are just the exception that proves the rule. It's not all of a sudden a masterclass in sound design, but the sounds don't distract from the rest of the game anymore. Unsatisfying boss fights. Technically, half of this is carryover from the last one, but as for the other half, this time around we have 4 bosses plus 3 mini-bosses. Gonna keep some of them shrouded for story reasons, and these bosses are much more satisfying to fight. None of them feel like long drawn-out poking contests, and that's even with me playing on the new increased difficulty setting, so if not even that turns these bosses into bullet sponges, hey, that actually works now, then you know that the damage scaling, I guess, has really been ironed out, and the bosses are way more fun for it. Claustrophobic linear level design. Now, just to be clear, this is still a linear game, and even the strategy to add variety to that hasn't changed. It's still about finding hidden recipes. But unlike before, where you would find a handful of very small hidden rooms, now the recipes are in much larger offshoots from the main path that you can actually explore. And there's a lot more of them. Most of the recipes are found this way now, so even though it's not a huge change, everything feels more open. And honestly, I think the best demonstration of how much better the diversions are handled in this chapter is simply the number of times I got choice paralysis when I couldn't tell which path was optional. It happened a lot. Options. Just the options. Eh? You see that? That's me pressing the H key to jump. Yeah. And that's me changing it back because no. But yeah, rebindable keys, one-click resolution options, and it's still ugly, but I don't care. And that's every single negative comment I made being addressed in some way or another, which honestly I didn't expect. And like I said, there's a lot more here than just that. So at this point, the reservations I had about recommending this game at its current price are gone. I say current price because, as I really should have said last time, they plan on increasing the price with major updates. Sorry about that. They didn't increase it this time, so reservations gone. So now, with all those strings cut, let's move on to the new. And the name of the game is variety in just about every way. Let's take, for instance, the environments. They vary wildly, ranging anywhere from post-apocalyptic nightmare to winter wonderland, and so much in between. And like I've already said, the level design is a lot more open, so exploring this is really quite a sight to see. Got a little something for everyone. But of course, the main variety still comes with the food, and these recipes allow you to really commit to probably stupid, but still very fun builds. And that stupid fun is amplified even further by the added ability to enhance almost all of these new recipes. Essentially, you can level up your food, making them radically better versions of themselves. I'm not entirely sure that it's fair, but it is fun, and that's the most important thing. Plus, it makes gaining insight feel important. Insight is the currency or experience system, depending on how you want to look at it. And before, it felt pointless. To the point that I don't think I mentioned it last time, whereas this time around, they added a new Game Plus feature with increased insight gain, just so that it's somewhat feasible for you to max out everything. These enhancements get pretty pricey, so essentially, they fixed an easily ignored balance problem by allowing you to become super broken, and I'm here for it. They even added these types of enhancements to the Chapter 1 recipes. After the fact, they did that while I was making this. And, funny story, I had to cut a bee joke because of that. Still pretty upset about it. Weapons. Alright, so the biggest thing about this has already been mentioned. Each weapon is viable and interesting because instead of aesthetic improvements, each one of the primary weapons has a unique effect. For example, the spears, one is a gun that fires every third strike. This one can have its attack held for more power and reach, and then the ice spear can be charged to shoot a projectile. None of which are super exciting, really pale in comparison to the food, but the game is called Dungeon Munchies, so that's probably by design. And the food and weapons aren't as separate as it would seem. They do combine together to give you a wide range of options with comparable damage outputs. So that's the biggest thing. However, there is one new thing I want to talk about, and that's the summoner archetype. Before, there was one secondary weapon that could summon skeletons, but now it's its own primary weapon class. The reason I want to talk about this is simple. Because that's probably all the footage you would have got under normal circumstances had I not had other things going on. Why do I like summoning birds so much? Doesn't matter. I want to talk about the boss fights. I skipped the normal enemies. That's fine. They're good. They're varied. They're fun to fight, challenging. I like it. The bosses. Massive improvement. I've already talked about the damage scaling, but really everything that goes into these bosses is leagues above what we had before. The attack variety of each boss, the phase changes in the individual fights feel bigger and more important. The presentation is so much smoother, to the point that these bosses almost feel like they came out of a different game. The designs, art, and animations are just... And the music! Oh my god, the music is good. I realized that it seemed like that was going to be something more extreme, but you have to understand how big of an improvement that is. Before, and this goes for all of Chapter 1's music, I could only describe it as placeholder, or maybe simplistic if I wanted to be diplomatic about it, but this new music, it has some identity to it. It's a soundtrack, and I got a little excited. I apologize. I'm keeping the energy though. So, that's the overview of how I feel about these bosses. But I want to go more in depth, in particular with this one, because I like all of these bosses, but this fight makes the other ones seem formulaic by comparison. Every other boss fight in this game involves you getting locked in a single room arena until there's a corpse. it's allowed to be yours, but then you have to try again, and that's not ideal. And there's nothing wrong with that. But this T-1000 Vocaloid thing takes a play out of Super Meat Boy's book and has you running through a series of death corridors after each phase, and then you start the next phase in a new arena. And it's such a refreshing change of pace. You get to use all of the movement upgrades you've accumulated to their full potential, and it makes the fight feel a lot more tense and hectic. It's great. I love this fight. You know what? That's for you. Made a sticker and everything. So you know it's official. Alright, so the one criticism I do have about these boss fights is I really wish they varied it up with the invulnerability phases. I like the bullet hell stuff, I've said that before, but it's become predictable, and at a certain point they all start to feel the same, and with these bosses having so much character in every other aspect, I don't want to think that. I'm into it, I'm having fun, and then just a third of the way into the fight, I can't help it, the thought just pops up. This again. And I start having fun again, but it's still not what I want. And speaking of things I don't want to happen, the story. And that's not a spoiler. It's a peek into how my view of the story has changed. Because before, in the original chapter story, the way everything was written had this energy to it, it was fun and really endeared itself to me. There was a lot of charm, but now, they still have that, but they can hurt me. There's been enough built that I'm invested, and they can destroy that if they want. Like, they had little bits of intrigue before that I found interesting, but they flushed so much stuff out in this chapter. There's a lot of revelations, there's way more character interactions that give a really fun dynamic to everything, along with not so thinly veiled social commentary, but even that's done in an enjoyable way. So, overall, thoughts on the story, I love it. And I'm afraid they'll rip that away from me. Fingers crossed. But those are my thoughts on the second chapter of Dungeon Munchies. It's very good, with so many improvements from the previous chapter that it basically feels like a sequel. And I think that shows something about the whole early access situation. My opinion about it overall has not changed, but so far it's worked really well for this game. Every problem I had before is addressed in this second chapter, and it's possible, even likely, that without all of the feedback and funding from early access players that these improvements would have never been made, and the game would have been so much less for it. I mean, I'm pretty pessimistic, and even I have to acknowledge that Majaja is doing it right. I mean, this was a lie, but playing with the controller is also still bad. What was I talking about? Funding your game with early access is way different than me being a lazy piece of shit. Oh, God. And we're back here. How? Just like chronologically, how? Oh. This is much worse.